VP of DEI and Recognition at Hilton, DeShaun Porter, and the CEO and founder of Walton Isaacson, Aaron Walton, in conversation with Skift hospitality reporter Cameron Sperance.
Hey everyone, Aaron and DeShaun, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Y'all, before we begin, I want to give credit where credit is due. DeShaun, you are Vice President of DEI and Recognition at Hilton, which always gets high marks for its diversity and inclusion initiatives. And Aaron, if being CEO of Walton Isaacson isn't enough, you're behind some of the world's most iconic marketing campaigns across a whole host of companies and features, Lexus and Black Panther, just to name a couple. I'm in awe. So let's just dive right in. I mean, we're 18 months from when there was a global wake-up call, particularly here in the US, around diversity and inclusion. DeShaun, is the travel industry really taking steps towards meaningful change, or are we seeing some just pure lip service?
I think that is a great question, and you are definitely jumping right into it, right into the deep end. And I actually love that question. Listen, I truly believe so. I think that travel is all about connections, and delivering an inclusive experience in both travel as well as in the workplace is real. There is the noble intent there, and now there is also the action. I believe in what we're experiencing now is a higher standard for what inclusion, how that inclusion is experienced. You know, before it was primarily about how people were treated. But in recent years, it's now expanded. The baseline for inclusion has expanded. We are now talking about, like, where do you essentially start? There's the realization that it does not just happen. Action has to be put behind it. And with that action, there also has to be process and great intention. And so you're seeing that now. I mean, companies are focused on how do they ensure access to a diverse pool of talent? How do you evolve the talent process to address and remove bias? How do you also have that great call for representation at all leadership levels? And so this is real. You know, when we take a step back and we think about last year, out of unfathomable tragedy was groundbreaking awakenings. And we're seeing that type of commitment. We're seeing lots of companies come forth and talk about now, basically externally, their commitment to diversity and inclusion. And also what we're seeing is people holding them accountable. It cannot just be lip service. People are walking out. That great resignation is real. If I'm not feeling included and I'm not feeling valued, I have other options. I'm not staying, right? And now you're having more companies that is out there, and they're looking for that talent that's saying, hey, I'm just not valued where I'm at. So where is my next opportunity? Where am I going to have a voice? At Hilton, and yes, I thank you for mentioning all of the awards. The awards is important, but we're not resting on our laurels. We are definitely placing action behind that. And so we made the decision earlier this year to be transparent about our commitments, right? And then show progress year over year. And we're holding our leaders accountable, and our team members are holding us accountable to that. So our commitments are now out there, and we are planning on not just hitting them, but basically maximizing, going above and beyond by 2027. And then the other thing I want to mention to that is, while our commitments are focused right now on ethnicity and gender, inclusion and diversity is much broader than skin deep or gender, right? There's so much more to it. And I think that is where we're going to have to continue to essentially focus. But no, I don't think that it's lip service. I think the intention is real. And I think the accountability is going to be realer.
Great. Aaron, I want to bring you in here in the deep end with us. If you have a minute, I want to do a little walk down memory lane, because you spoke at this event last year and you said differences are disruptive and allow for a break from patterns and blind spots, yet change can be hard. At Walton Isaacson, you refer to yourselves as enlightened rebels, which suggests you have a non-traditional approach to inclusivity. So can you walk us through that approach?
Sure. I wish I could give everyone an Oculus kind of VR headset, because the approach is not linear and it's really very dimensional. I'd like to say that you actually have to have the courage to collide. And if you think of that collision as innovation or even as a kaleidoscope, you start to see, how we like to shake things up and reframe things and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because, healthy tensions are key to breakthroughs. So the process may seem messy to some, but that's like saying, a Jackson Pollock painting is messy. That said, we do overlay structure because we know that structural issues, bias, racism, et cetera, require us to kind of take apart old structures and then that are problematic and then design new ones. So for us, first, we start with identifying what problem are we really trying to solve for? And that varies widely based on the client, but also, we identify the blind spots. And identifying blind spots, it's almost universally a strong kind of starting point because every group has them. Every individual has them. I have them, you have them. So we really kind of try to address that. And as with design, we like the idea of being having a beginner's mindset and focusing in on empathy, which is really important with clients, with audiences, with human brands, because brands are all about the people behind them. It's not enough to work externally with diverse advertising images, for example. It has to start internally. So we spend a lot of time inside of our clients' kind of internal ecosystem. And then the ideation starts, and we encourage perspectives coming from a variety of sources to avoid that kind of sameness, to avoid that trap that you get into, which is very easy to get into when you're not surrounding yourself with people who have different points of view. And then people actually, when they feel like they have a say in the process, when they feel like they are being treated equitably, they fight for their ideas, a little bit harder. And everyone has, their points that they want to bring up. So it seems a little messy. It might seem a little chaotic, but ultimately getting into the DE&I really requires that kind of work.
Absolutely. DeShaun, I want to bring you in here. I mean, how do you engage the entire company in an inclusive process around DEI? And I mean, what are some of those internal programs and discussions you've helped to foster?
Yeah, so I love what Aaron shared is like, this is not a linear journey, right? And we have to be able to feel comfortable with it being a little bit messy. But I think where it starts at understanding what is it that we stand for. I mean, the founder of Hilton, Conrad Hilton, he said he set out to fill the earth with the light and warmth of hospitality. And so what does hospitality mean? That is people connecting with people. It's bringing people together. So we are in the business of people serving people, and we have to make sure that they feel as though that they have a voice, and not just that they feel it, but they actually do have a voice. And so how do you create that culture of inclusion, if you will? And I think it really starts with having a vision, and that kind of vision. Yes, it could be the vision of our founder, but also we've created a framework around that to bring that to the forefront. And so the framework that we have is culture, talent, and marketplace. All that we do, our DEI space is built around that particular framework. And when you're able to share and communicate that with our team members, as well as with the external public, they will understand that this is what we are driving to. And when people can essentially see that vision, they are more apt to being able to lean in and follow, to provide the ideas that align to that. So we have those collaborative initiatives of people coming together. And that's really the secret sauce of our success. I think it's us taking a moment to pause and listen to those ideas from every level. While it may start at the top, it is fueled and ignited by the talent at every single level. And so from the bottom up, I will also share with you that we last year, in the light of everything was happening and following the murder of George Floyd, we launched what we call our Courageous Conversation series. And that was a series of internal discussions where we brought in external leaders to basically start lifting the lid off of these topics that were previously considered taboo in the workplace. Systemic racism. We didn't talk about that before. We're having those conversations now. We didn't talk about kind of microaggressions or the fact that, there's an emotional labor that is attached to women and the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on communities of color, right? As well as how are women faring in the workplace and the number of women that had to exit the workplace through COVID in which to care for families. We spoke about all of that. We also brought that into what does it mean to be an inclusive and an empathetic leader? Gone are the days where people are just managing the work. No, if we are saying that we're wanting people to show up and be their authentic selves, that means that a leader has to be able to lead every aspect of that person and understand and tap into every aspect of that person. And so those conversations set that foundation and gave permission for people to actually show up authentically, for people to be able to say, I just experienced that on TV and it is breaking me down. No, I can't meet that deadline. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm falling apart. And so being able to just have those authentic and genuine conversations, it creates an environment of trust, an environment of understanding. It's allowing us to foster moments of genuine curiosity that leads to lifelong learning. And that lifelong learning is where more and more people are feeling included. They're feeling embraced. And that's where we are essentially unlocking the best potential of our talent. And so we're going to continue to do that because we just think it's critical.
And I think you both, I want to highlight this. I think you both gave a very important action item for our audience in that, don't be afraid to get messy at the beginning. I was at a accessibility for journalists panel the other day, and the instruction was, don't be afraid, you might fail at the beginning. In fact, you probably will at the beginning, but keep going. And
definitely. Ask for grace. Like, we need grace.
Exactly.
I've learned more from my failures than I've ever had from my successes. So you have to be just prepared to jump in and get messy and do the work that's required. So
absolutely. Aaron, often brands outside of travel as well as within travel, they maybe didn't know they had a problem around inclusivity, can be a little hesitant to change. Are you detecting if brands are looking to take greater steps now to maybe move faster, be a little bit more agile on the inclusion front, given the conversations that have taken place since last summer or summer of 2020?
Listen, the summer of 2020 kind of brought this flurry of brands who wanted to put out statements and play catch up. But now, you look a year later, we're seeing what a difference real leadership can make. Some brands are still doing the work because it's hard work and it requires a commitment. It requires consistency. When we're told that a brand is a little bit risk averse or they're a little bit concerned, we remind them that the bigger risk is actually not responding to the changes in society, right? People want their brands to be on the right side of history and to stand for something. But we've also seen kind of the pendulum swing back in the other direction. And there are brands who have not lived up to their statements and have kind of retreated back to their comfort zone, their safe zone. And if you're not at least somewhat uncomfortable doing that, DE&I work that is required, you're probably not going to get to the root of the problems, which is where the opportunities exist. So I like what DeShaun was talking about. It starts with the conversation. It starts with being honest about the fact that we have to bring it up. We have to make it visible. We have to talk about it and know that when you have a diverse group of people, you're going to have a lot of different solutions. You're going to have a lot of different ways and different approaches to it. Maybe not one is the only solution, but it's the collective group that can help you get to that great space that you need to be in.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I hear you brought a video to show us, Aaron. If we can tee that up.
Oh, sure.
We are here. We are here.
We appreciate the dialogue.
We see the effort from Hollywood,
but we need more.
We are here.
We've been here.
And in the morning, if I'm blessed to possess breath,
I
will still be here.
But do you see me in this industry?
You act as if bias doesn't exist.
Would you rather breathe life into stereotypes?
Or stand up against them?
Because what I know of my culture
Isn't who you portray me to be.
So show me.
All of me.
Not just who you written me to be.
See me.
We are more than a splash of color on your white canvas.
Hear me.
We're not your quota.
We are quotable.
Show me me.
Not your me. Me.
I am not asking.
And nor am I leaving.
We've been here.
But don't just see us.
Stand with A&A's aim.
Let us come together so that we can create waves of change.
It's time to see
all.
all.
Very powerful. And Aaron, I mean, that kind of, I want to kind of pose the question to you that I started with DeShaun is, I mean, I think representation in advertising is a huge step forward that we've seen recently. But I mean, how are you advising clients that, kind of like the video says, I mean, people are wanting to see more and they want to see the true authenticity. So how do you prep them for that, and how do you advise them for that?
You know, I'll tell you that video, it's really funny. When I was watching it, it just brought back memories because we shot that at the beginning of the pandemic. So we actually had to have everyone use their iPhones to shoot themselves, send us. And by the way, no one ever pays attention to, make sure it's horizontal. But the talent was absolutely spectacular because they believed in the mission. They believed in what it was like not to be seen and to be stereotyped and to be typecast. And that was a piece that we did for a PSA that we did for AIM, which is the multicultural arm of the ANA, and the Alliance of AIM is the Alliance for Inclusion in Multicultural Marketing, for those of you who don't know. And it really talked to the heart, not just about what marketers need to do, but what broadcasters need to do in terms of making sure that people are feeling inclusive. There's the inclusive track, speaking to a broader audience by, including diverse segments in everything from internal corporate composition to external staffing, marketing images, and kind of virtually touching every touch point, including language choices, and more importantly, the narrative storytelling. But there's also what I call, centered work or centered track, where certain target audiences are centered and the focus is on them, not on the broad, the broad audience, but allies will start to be attracted by their virtual interests in being included in the community's experiences. So inclusion doesn't have to default to the dominant culture. That's what I don't like about the way the word often gets used. It's always implying that communities of color or dominant cultures into white dominant culture, right? But for the travel industry, it's often very attractive to non-white travelers to be centered and to be spoken to from their perspective about issues that are important to them in ways that are in culture and in language. And at the heart of community-led tourism is respect and equity and authenticity. And that's kind of at the heart of culturally specific marketing. There are parallels, and I think there are a variety of choices and opportunities and approaches that are important to diverse communities, from inclusive luxury travel to in-culture luxury travel to community-led travel. So I do think we have to continue to put our lenses on from someone else's perspective, and that's how we get much more inclusive work, and that's how we get work that's more meaningful to a wider, broad audience.
Absolutely. DeShaun, for a lot of this work that is underway already at Hilton, I mean, how do you make some of these steps forward as a global company like yours when some parts of the world have different perspectives?
Yeah, listen, 100%. I think first and foremost, we take it back to our values, right? We hire against our values, and our top one is literally all around, right? And we think about integrity, but hospitality is at the core of what we do. And so that is how we're wanting people to show up. Hospitality does not have a race, a color, or a creed. And so while we recognize, yes, we are definitely doing business in different parts of the world, and you might definitely have some biases, some different understandings, all of that stuff exists, then that's also where our training comes in, right? So we basically have inclusivity training, but we also have cultural awareness training. And I think when you pair those two together and we are holding people accountable to delivering on an experience, while also in the background continuing to coach them to peel back and teach them how to be curious, non-judgmental curiosity will allow that organic connection and that further understanding in which to create that inclusive experience. So we definitely have incredibly high standards, but we train to that as well. We're wanting people to come to the table with it organically, and we can fill in a few gaps here and there with that training.
Excellent. Aaron, I mean, we've heard from today's discussions that community-based tourism is on the rise with the aim of offering more authentic activities that benefit host communities while you're still appealing to the multicultural consumer. What are some innovative ways that travel brands could use to speak to a more diverse audience? And, feel free to share some examples.
Well, look, I think that I love one of my favorite quotes was from the late Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. He used to say, all politics are local, right? It all starts there. And I do think that there are some incredible opportunities that are authentic in these areas that people need to understand and hear about. Very culturally driven, very unique to those specific areas. And I don't know why we're not celebrating more of those, right? There are places where Hilton is located that are unique in the areas that surround them, that are unique culturally driven centers. And so I'm sure, organizations like Hilton or other travel opportunities or travel industry experts would tell you that being able to provide an authentic, respectful experience in that local area will be one of the ways that you're going to get people coming back more often and celebrating who they are, where they are, in a way that is real and respectful to what they do. Certainly in terms of the media choices, we can clearly target these consumer groups digitally. I think that's one of the kind of great things about the digital age in terms of the ROI and really understanding how we're connecting with consumers, how the message is resonating with consumers in a real time, in a way that can be adjusted and can bring back the people that we want to see in our locations.
Excellent. DeShaun, I mean, is this something like, can Hilton add to this with its own messaging?
I think there's a few ways. I think, for starters, we have to think more broadly around our ecosystem for which our business is sustained and ensuring that that's diverse. So we have a award-winning supplier diversity team that is constantly challenging our vendors, right? And those that we do business with to ensure that they have diversity initiatives in place. And so it's kind of that give and take, that exchange. Yes, we are wanting to ensure that we are doing business with others that have similar values to us as well. I think when we think about it internally, it's around DEI taking a much broader stance. So we have pathway programs that are founded upon lifelong learning. So second chances, taking a look at how can we support the communities in which we are doing business. Refugee programs we have in place. We're taking a look at how do we ensure that we have accessibility measures in place, both on property as well as through corporate. And then, of course, ensuring that we have a platform to where we can expand and make sure that we're bringing new team members in and making this an inclusive place for them. So there's so many different avenues that we can take, but I take it back to, again, that Courageous Conversation series that gave us that permission to talk about these things. So, and really drive some greater awareness. So then that is fueling our ability in which to really be inclusive when we have guests, to really be inclusive and naturally, organically inclusive, if you will, not that like fake stuff that's off the, real inclusion, which is key. And that's what I think people are looking for. And so that's what we are anchoring to.
I love what DeShaun said about the ecosystem in terms of the supplier chain, because these diverse suppliers bring in a different perspective and a different group of experts to help you achieve your goal. And we're very, very purposeful in making sure that we are inclusive in a range of suppliers, particularly suppliers who've not often had an opportunity to participate in some of the big initiatives. And you see a lot of that in commercial work where, you get a lot of these commercials are done by the same people at the same time. And if you really want innovation, if you really want to start to expand the audience, you've got to start to go beyond the obvious kind of folks that you're normally working with. So I think that's a critical point, and it makes great business sense. It adds to the bottom line in a way that is so easy to do when you actually put the time and the focus around it. So I love what you were talking about.
Absolutely. We only have a couple of minutes left. I mean, time's flying by, but we have kind of we started in the deep end. I think we're going to have another big one that I'm going to pose to you is just, looking ahead, what do you deem as an important benchmark for success or progress when it comes to inclusion or travel? We've discussed how it can be a complex process. So, I mean, how do you keep this mission living and not become something static? DeShaun, how about we start with you?
Oh, here you go with the deep end question. I love them. Keep them coming. I wish we had more time. Listen, inclusion is an ever evolving process. As people evolve, how you include them has to evolve as well. I think when we fully understand the real value of diversity, it is then that we will stop worrying about it becoming stale or static. It has been, and it always will be essential for the greatest success. And so we need to make sure that we are creating an environment where people can come in, feel included, give their best selves, and then we're just going to continue to see businesses to thrive.
Aaron, what about you?
Look, I think leadership is everything, right? It's make or break. If you don't have inclusive, authentic leaders in an organization, you're really not going to inspire every level of the organization to do the hard work. And it is hard work. I think a lot of people think it's pretty easy. You put out a statement, you hire, doing the checking the boxes, making sure you're celebrating all the right holidays. There seems to be a lot of just add water and instant diversity solutions come. And while those may make you feel good, the honeymoon effect, happens, but it wears off. And you're kind of back to square one. But studies have shown that if you aren't consistent and you aren't, credible with this, then it can set you back even further. I think some of the best leaders I know look at this as a serious business initiative, or they are really if they don't, they're kind of missing the opportunity to grow their business. I think real leadership includes a real understanding of what DE&I means as a business goal. And like any other business goal, it kind of requires a commitment, strategy, measurement, accountability, and it also requires, the deep leadership. I tell folks, we look at the 5 Ps. It needs to be a priority. It needs to be made personal. It needs to link to profit. It needs to have a higher purpose, and it requires persistence. And I think when you look at those kind of ways of measuring, and you can kind of go back each year and see how you're doing against it and be transparent about it, which is what, DeShaun and Hilton are doing, it only helps the organization grow and move in the direction that you want it to be.
It sounds like I lied. I know I said that was the last question, but just kind of a follow-up to both of you. It does sound like allyship plays a big part in the longevity of this mission, and I feel like this could be its own panel. But I mean, for those tuning in, what do you need to do to be a true, genuine ally to help foster this?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to have some empathy. You have to understand the world through someone else's, lens. And I think if you're open to that, you're going to be open to seeing things and being curious and jumping into something that might be uncomfortable, but you're going to get comfortable because you're starting to solve problems. You're starting to solve challenges. I do think that this is not just about the diverse segment doing the work. This has to be about everyone doing the work. This has to be about allies coming on and understanding not only is it important for these diverse communities, but it's also important for the other communities that will benefit from this. So I can't underscore enough the critical importance of allies stepping up and owning part of the responsibility for this. It can't be just on the shoulders of a few people to turn the ship around. It has to be a group effort.
Absolutely. DeShaun, I'll close with you. What are your thoughts on allyship?
Yeah, you know what? I think the key to allyship is that there has to be action, right? It cannot be like a lukewarm friendship. It literally has to be you are locked in and you are loaded and you are willing to make the sacrifice and step into that place, like Aaron says, of being uncomfortable, right? What are you willing to risk in which to ensure that somebody else has a voice? And if they are not at that table, then making sure that you are willing to stand in that gap for them and speak on their behalf and potentially share their story. So it starts with that empathy, that understanding, but then again, also pivoting into that action. Allyship without action is absolutely nothing. So that is what I think is so critically important. And we all need allies. And in order for us to be literally a better place as an entire world, we're needing people to come together in the spirit of allyship.
Great note to end on. Y'all, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate y'all joining us, and pleasure to chat.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.